Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eLearn Hotseat, the eLearn podcast, depending on what time you're listening to this. If you're listening to this today, right now, it's April 21st, 2022. There's a lot of t's in there for me, sorry. But yeah, if you're listening right now, we're live with some good friends of ours, Amy Price and Becky Keith of IntelliBoard. I'm going to let you both introduce yourself here in just a second. But before we do that, I want to welcome everyone. We do this hot seat now on a regular basis on every Thursday now because we want to have interaction with our community. We're giving our community the ability to engage with us, ask questions, bring comments, those kinds of things, because nothing is more exciting about e-learning than actually participating, right? And we're actually lucky enough. I don't know, is she a colleague or something? Samantha Rager?
Yeah, one of our awesome colleagues. Here as support and friends.
If you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see there's already a comment in there. So that is your indication if you're listening or watching. And we see you. We actually see how many people are kind of checking us out on LinkedIn and Facebook. Please join us. My name is Laddick. I work for this company right here, OpenLMS. And OpenLMS is a provider of learning management systems, but we work with partners like IntelliBoard and to provide the best learning experience out there. But this isn't a sale. We're not here to do any sales. We're here to talk about all of the cool stuff that people can do with data in the learning environment. So let's see. Amy, why don't we go first with you? I like to always start I don't want to butcher who you are or what you do. So why don't you give us the 30 seconds on who Amy Price is?
The 30 seconds of Amy Price, sure. So I am Amy, and I've been with IntelliBoard for a long time, and I am thankful to be here. And at the most heart of everything, I'm a big data nerd. Before IntelliBoard, I worked in higher education, primarily with first-year students with retention efforts. That can sometimes feel touchy-feely, but it's really still needs to be data-driven, and the impacts that we have on that beyond just academic learning also need to be data-driven. And then one step before that, I was doing compliance for a federal grant. And if I have any friends who are doing compliance for federal grants with us here today, they know, and I knew, that it was a moving target, and really it was all quantitative. It all was data-driven. And data can be daunting. It can be across several different areas, but it's so important to bring it all together, and it's so important to make it easy to be then informing our decisions, right? So the 30 seconds of that is I had these two very different data experiences, and then I get to work for this company that seeks to make that easier. And it fulfills both my need to help people and to be making data-driven decisions. So it's kind of like the perfect match. And then I get to work with amazing people like Becky Keith, who I'm going to pass it over to for the next 30 seconds.
Super cool. Becky, do you have quite as compelling story as that?
Well, if Amy is the data nerd, I am coming in as the instructional technology nerd. So my background is the classroom and K-12 education. So my coming into IntelliBoard and the role that I play at IntelliBoard is more of the platform, the instructional technology, and how it impacts the instructors and makes their life easier. So I started way back as a high school teacher. And then my master's is in instructional technology, or secondary education and instructional technology. So I always wanted to get my hands on all of the tools and use the platforms in my classroom. And, that led me one thing after another, and ended up here at IntelliBoard, where my role is to listen to the instructors, listen to our clients, their needs, work cross-departmental to develop the platform that really ultimately is not just about delivering data, but improving educational outcomes.
Wow. I mean, we have a lot to talk about here, because now we've got data nerds, we've got instructional design nerds. I'm just a regular nerd. So
we're just nerds. We are. All of us. All three of us.
I want to throw it back to you, Becky, because I think this is a platform question, but tell me if I'm wrong. I know that IntelliBoard, this is something that Anatoly, kind of put out there, I think about a year ago in the last eLearn Success Summit with us, or maybe it was on a hot seat a little while ago. I'm forgetting. I'm talking with Tanya Rani about this. We had Elizabeth Dahl. IntelliBoard Next. What I'm going to admit, I can't put, wrap my fingers around what, tell me what IntelliBoard Next is and why I should be excited about it, or why everybody should be excited about it.
All right. How long is this interview? No. So IntelliBoard Next is back to the end of the intro, is that we want to improve educational outcomes. So IntelliBoard is not a data company. We don't just want to deliver data, because then that means that someone else has to analyze it. And we're giving them the first piece of it, but we're not actually telling them the whole story. So IntelliBoard Next is just the next evolution of learning analytics. So back when Anatoly started it, the need was to deliver data, deliver a report, take everything from the LMS and build a report. And that met the need. But then it became, now we want visualizations. And then it became, we want the big picture visualizations, and then we want to drill down into the data. And then it became, okay, I see the issue. Now what are you going to do about it? Oh, so now I still need to go do something. Yeah, thanks for showing me this, but now I have to go do it. So IntelliBoard Next is that next step of, we want to solve your problems. We want to improve learning outcomes. We want to not just show you the data or make it pretty. We want to do something about it, so the end result is that your instructors are successful and that your learners are successful as well. So it's actionable data. It's taking that data and predictive learning analytics, notifications, bringing data sources together, because just an LMS data doesn't tell the full story. So it's combining data from multiple sources. It's showing you the visualizations, making it really easy to dive down into your data, to customize and personalize the data definitions for your institution, because they're not all the same. Make predictions on learners, notify the learners, the instructors, the success coaches, whomever, the athletic coaches, anyone at the institution who plays a role in the students' lives, to inform them with the data that they need, so that it impacts the learning and the success of the students.
Cool.
So that's IntelliBoard Next. It's the next level of actionable data.
Fantastic. And I'm gonna save the demo for anybody who comes to the eLearn Success Series here. We have our next session on May 4th coming up here in just under 2 weeks. IntelliBoard will be there in the chat. They'll be there in our community. If you want to see how that works, you can go over there and do that. But and I also just want to just remind everyone, this is live right now on April 21st, and I know some of these are your colleagues like Artie and Samantha, and obviously Tanya there. Thanks for putting some comments in the chat. If you are listening and you have a question or a comment for Becky or Ama, please put it in. It doesn't matter what platform you're working on. We actually see them all. So, go ahead and do that. Becky, I think I should give this question to Amy, and tell me if I'm wrong though. But as we the question I want to ask is, I often hear that people are like, yes, data. Yeah, we need to use data, and yet we either fail to do that as instructors or administrators or just institutions, or we get to that stage where, okay, yeah, we have IntelliBoard, we collect it, it's there, and sure, maybe we get that one report about who's logged on or whatever like that. But then what I often hear is we're not really using data and the platforms that we have to the greatest extent. So in your experience, Amy, what are those barriers? How do we overcome and make this easy, make this, make data not only accessible, but something that you can use, from, if I'm a 10-person institution to a 10,000, 100,000 person institution?
Sure. And that's this is the $1 million question, right? And if I had the magic wand to say, here are all the time, right? Here's all the time, here are all the resources, and I'm going to take off our own personal humanness of being a little intimidated by it, I would, right? But I unfortunately don't have the magic wand. But the recommendations, I think, are completely the same. And if you're listening in and you have recommendations, please do drop those in, because we want to hear them and celebrate them. But to me, it's always identifying where you have, one, your champions, and two, your biggest needs, right? So and the work is not about just the tool, right? Like the tool is there and the tool seeks to do stuff, especially IntelliBoard Next, that will allow you to personalize it and make it your own, so it becomes less scary, right? Like when I see myself in something and I see my language and I see my terminology, I'm more likely to accept it, right? But I also think what we miss, the simplest part of identifying a quick question. It doesn't have to be like save retention, right? Like there are components within retention we should focus on first, right? What is that question? Where can we make the impact? Where are our champions? How can we use that peer support and excitement? One of the things that we often talk about in adoption and rolling out is choose one, right? Like choose one department, and then identify what that one department needs and let it grow out organically, so that we have one question. We're going to tackle that. That question is obviously going to bring additional questions. Well, why is it that this tool is being utilized way more than this tool? That then becomes a professional development conversation. But we often start too big and it becomes too scary to jump in fully. So my recommendation would be, and I hope this is where you wanted us to track, is identify your champions, identify those folks who are excited about data, identify how we can help them save time, right, with getting that information quicker, and then grow from that pool.
It actually tracks really well for me because, we recently had on the podcast and a little while ago on the hot seat a gentleman named Al Kingsley, who's been talking about ed tech for like 30 years now. And this was one of his key points as well, was, find those individuals in your institution who want to raise their hands and who want to say, hey, look, I'm interested in this. I want to do this, or I've figured this out. And it doesn't necessarily have to be put in the procedure manual or, put in the org chart immediately, but, use those people. He called it signposting, right? And then actually, say, hey, look, Becky actually got this figured out. Like if you're trying to figure out how do you help your class go, maybe Becky could have a brown bag on this or something like that. So I find that really interesting. It's the informal network, the informal build-up within an organization as well.
But I'm just to add on to that too. It makes me think of, when I was an instructional technology integration specialist, the idea of, sometimes we focus on those that we know are going to struggle with it or aren't going to embrace it. But so not focusing, when you integrate a new technology, regardless, IntelliBoard or whatever the platform is, focusing on those high flyers and that next group also, that with time, so you have your early adopters and they're going to champion it, and then focus on that next group. Not necessarily, it seems like a lot of times we always focus on those that we know are going to struggle with it and aren't going to adopt it. And then a lot of times we don't implement something because we're looking at those users. So, my suggestion would always be to think about those that are going to implement it and work with those, and then it'll trickle down. Maybe not the first year, but the second year or the third year. But if you start with, those high flyers, and then when you roll something out like that.
So IntelliBoard's been around for a while. What I'd love to hear is like, what's a great case study of, either an aha moment or something where, a client that you work with really, they've now kind of become proficient. Like what are the things that they can do now, or that have just kind of become a part of their day-to-day that weren't maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, or maybe pre-pandemic, something like that? I don't know who's better at that, Amy or Becky. I'm gonna choose Amy.
I think we both can speak to it, certainly. But to me, it's when we hear from clients who are like, this report is my air. It's the air that I breathe. I wouldn't be able to answer the questions that I need answered to monitor my systems, right? It's also when we hear from clients who are like, you know what, I used your reporting to qualify asking for additional funding to support our students, right? Like, look where they are, look what they're doing, look at this increase in utilization, especially with the pandemic. You know, when budgets are tight across the board and we need clarification on how to prioritize that budgetary dollar, and when we're making the impact of it, like that's what it's all about, right? I think and hearing from other clients who are like, we couldn't do the compliance reporting without knowing that these people are complete in the way that we've been able to automate this to save time, right? I used to have to go into every single course to monitor the student because I'm in the academic advisor, right? And I had to go we could spend the rest of the podcast going through the click paths, right? Like, to hear the seamless integration of this and then what it has done to their time to give back what people really want to be doing. Like, we're, again, like, I'm going to go back to, we're all nerds, right? You have to find, and my other answer to that other question was like, find the nerds, right? Like, find the nerds who want to adopt it, but also like, we're the nerds that also just want to educate folks, right? Like, give me back my time to do what I'm passionate about, which is improving education. And so to me, the greatest highlight is when it's just so seamless and easy and breezy that we're not even thinking about how we're utilizing it because it's so ingrained into our work patterns.
So one of the things, so in the introduction, you guys both kind of put, where you came from on the table. I think I'd like, as the second part of this question, or where we're going right now, Becky, you came from K through 12, which, if I'm completely frank, I've been doing this for a while now. We talk about higher education a lot. We talk about corporate L&D a lot. I think K through 12 still gets, I don't want to say put on the back burner, but it's still kind of like, hey, as long as they're moving along, it's okay. Like, but talk to me about what data is important for K through 12 teachers. And then is that sort of a subtopic there, like, who's it important for? Is it just the teachers? Is it administration? Is it the parents? Like, I've got 3 kids. Everybody knows this, right? Like, I'm always interested, like, what data should I be sharing with parents and about that, how I can use that effectively?
Yeah, so everyone, all of them, parents, instructors, the administrators, as K-12, I'll speak K-12, but it's applicable all the way up. I need help juggling. I have so many things going on. And it's so easy for something to fall through the cracks. Just make my life easier. And data can do that, especially if someone else has done all the work, the hard part. So as an instructor, I need to know where my students are. Did they get today? Can I move on to tomorrow? And I think when I was in the classroom, having even like discipline, if something happens, where do I note that? Where do I put that down? Okay, I'll put it on this sticky note right here. Or, just collecting everything. Give me one spot to bring everything together. And so for the instructor in a K-12 classroom, IntelliBoard Next has the ability to input data directly into IntelliBoard. So I'm in the classroom, something random happens, a kid says something, I saw that the student didn't get it or whatever, I can right then, instead of putting it on my Post-it note or a random spreadsheet, I can just go straight to IntelliBoard and make a quick note, keep a kid after class, make a quick note. And then when it comes time for that parent conference, and I'm scrambling to figure out what I can say about that, one place I can go and see any notes that I've taken on that student. I can go and say, oh, yep, they didn't do well on that assessment, but it looks like they did not visit or did not spend time or did not complete, these activities. So are they spending time where I think a student comes in and says, I need help? you can pull up and see how they did on the last assessment. You can see how much time they spent on the resources that you've made available. So having that data equips you as the instructor for having those conversations with parents, for having those conversations with the learners. And as I think Amy mentioned, having that aggregate view of all of your courses together, so you don't have to drill down into each course and then click on the activity and then click on the time spent, but being able to look at one simple table and sort it by whatever I want to define as at risk, if it's time spent, or if it's visits, or if it's grade, or if it's participation. Having that data at my fingertips helps me with all of the balls that I have in the air juggling. An administrator, same thing. I think back to when they would walk around and come in each class and do a little observation of what's happening in the classroom. Working with IntelliBoard to identify what data is most valuable and then having that sent to the administrator makes everybody's life easier. And parents need data too. As parents, I also have 3 kids, and by the time, and I keep the apps that I have access to on my phone all the time, but a lot of times by the time that data gets to me, it's too late. So then I'm the crazy mom saying, why do you have a 0? Why did you not do this? Why did you have, and then we're being reactive. We want to be proactive, and bringing in data from the LMS and combining it with the SIS data. So the learning management system data, combining it with the student information allows parents to be proactive, and learners, take responsibility for your own learning. You have this coming up. You have this due. I would much rather get a notification that says something's due tomorrow so I can help my kids sit down and work on it, instead of being the mom at the end of the day, or 2 days late saying, why do you have a 0 for this? Now you need to go talk to your teacher and see if you can make it up. So it's as applicable to K-12 as it is to higher ed. And my role at IntelliBoard and Amy's is to make their lives easier. What process, what system, how can we streamline a process like entering that data straight into IntelliBoard? Like, what data is valuable to you? And then how can we make that data point? How can we get that to you on a regular automated basis so that what you need to know is at your fingertips?
So the thing that rumbles around in my head is, I'm a teacher. I'm either in the K-12 or I'm a professor in higher education. I don't feel this maybe so much in the corporate and learning development space, only because there's a different mindset there. But at least for the 2 academic places, they're like, look, I'm a teaching professional, right? Like I'm a subject matter expert. Like my degree is in this, and data analytics for education are not my. It's so far outside my wheelhouse that I don't want it. It's beyond this. Like, I don't want to deal with this, right? And then if I go down to K through 12, I just drinking from a fire hose is one of my favorite phrases, right? There's just so much where do these people turn to for support? I know we've gone back to the people who want to raise their hand, the signposts, the nerds who want to do it. Is there just that how do we overcome? I guess that's really the question I'm wondering. Like, I'm sure you hear it all the time, but we have the LMS administrator, we have IntelliBoard. They're like, look, we put all this together. Now they got to use it. Like, what are some of the ways that you've helped overcome that?
Start simple, right? Like, I think, and you're exactly right. Like the water hose, trying to drink from it is exactly right. One of the reports that I love the most is needs grading. It's literally a list of things that need to be graded, right? Like, put it in my fingertips, I'll highlight it, right? Like, give me the resources that, again, are going to save me time, that aren't making me do the data cartwheel of understanding what it is, right? Like, I want to be able to visualize something and see very quickly what I need to do about it. And so making sure, and there's different audiences that have access to IntelliBoard, and making sure that we're building in, and this goes with every tool, right? It's not just data, but making sure that we have the space to build in what we're doing with this and why is super, super important to me. And I think super important to, you're exactly right. Like, we're not all data engineers, nor are we all developers. And so there needs to be this tool or resources that make that understandable. I also think about how there's so many other duties as assigned, right? Like, I think about, we are all asked to take care of our students, and deeply we want to, right? Like, from a care perspective, we're asked to do retention reports and care reports, and we're asked to make sure that we're communicating upward when there's a concern. And how much of that can be captured in an environment, right? Students are doing things, right? Students are acting on things. If I have a student that I see as performing like this, and then all of a sudden goes down, I want that notification, and I want it to be automated. I don't want to have to wait for the faculty member to say, oh, you know what? It's been 2 weeks, I think, since fall break, and we haven't, did I see Becky? Right? Like, you're teaching 5 courses, right, as a higher ed, or maybe you in K through 12, you know that student's not there right away. You know that student's not there right away, but that their progression of assignments goes down very quickly. The LMS can tell us that without having me to think about it, right? I need you to tell me when these things happen, so that I then can use my educator energy on having the conversation with that student, impacting that student's life, creating space for that, because I've already been told to do it. Don't make me, as an educator, search for that. Give it to me. So then my job is not to understand it, not to ask for it, but to then act on the data that's available for me.
Mm. So you take me there, like you give some great examples of what I think as parents, or even as learners in higher ed, we would expect as, our performance data, like it's the grade you got on, in your reports, on the marks that you're getting on your tests and those kinds of things. But, you said earlier, I took notes that you were a part of that first year orientation, first year seminar courses, so this is softer, pardon me, this is softer stuff, or this is other stuff that is data we wouldn't usually think that an LMS would contain, or that is being captured. Talk me through, how are we capturing that? And then again, is that, where am I being notified of that as an instructor, or as a counselor, or as an administrator? Like, is it on my phone? Is it, where's it showing up?
Sure. And I think that this is where we do the big fat FERPA disclaimer, right? Like, we all need to be mindful of how data is shared. And it's also where we need to also remember that data should never be punitive, right? Like, and I don't want that across the board for anyone. Like, the data should be there to tell the story and highlight where we need to improve, but it needs to be done in an ethical and generous way, right? So I think about, from a retention standpoint, when there's so many things that come into retention, right? And we're seeing it with community colleges, we're seeing it with first generation students, we're seeing it in lots of different places. But it can be financial, it can be academic, it can be that they're working 2 jobs, it can be that they don't have access to a working car, right? Like, there's so many different things that are impacting our students. And I would dare say K-12 through adult learners, right? That as educators and at these institutions of learning, this team has this set of information. This team has this set of information. This team knows that they haven't used their meal card in 3 days. This team knows that they're no longer in their residence hall. This team knows that their parent or adult human may be unwell. And we've created these accidental silos, right? Like, how much of our work is already siloed, and we need a way to easily bring all of that together to then identify, okay, you student, and Becky, I'm going to pick on you, like you, Becky, have hit 3 of these. Amy, you've hit 4 of these. I need to prioritize finding you, but I don't have the tool to get all of these different things together to be able to identify that very quickly that Becky's hit 3 of my 5 concern points to be able to then take action on it. So I think a lot of it becomes organizing, right? And making sure that we can pull those data sets together, and then automating that so that we then have this clear report of where we need to take action.
Fantastic. Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll add on to that. So with IntelliBoard Next, we've built a notification creator that allows you to identify any column in a report and build a notification based on that data field. And it's not just data from the LMS. It can be data that's brought in from the SIS. It could be data that's brought in from that lunch, what'd you say, Amy, the scanning of your meal card. Like, you can bring all of that together. So for example, if you are, you have students who are on scholarship, and to keep the scholarship, they have to have a certain GPA. That scholarship data doesn't live inside the LMS. How do you easily follow those students and make sure that that they're on track to continue that scholarship? Well, you bring in that scholarship data and that student information system data that you can bring in. Or another example is taking the data that comes out of the LMS, but then adding calculations to it to make it a valuable data point. So for a lot of corporate courses, they don't have a definite start and end date, but they want the employees to finish within 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. K-12 virtual schools, there's no start and end date. The learner comes in, they sign up for the course. How do you know if they're on pace or not? Aside from individually following each one and going to all the classes. So we are able to create a new data point that doesn't exist anywhere called pacing, on pace indicator. And it looks at, you can bring the data in that says this course should be 60 days. This course should be 90 days. And then we have calculations that look at the total activities, the days since start, the enrollment start date, the total activities in the course to come up with the expected activities per day and the actual activities per day. And then the data field on pace indicator looks at if this is greater than that, on pace. If this is less than that, off pace. So then being able to take that data point, make it red and bold and add it to every report, or a visual of the number. I'm a teacher. What do I need to do today? Supervisor, and I need to know who's off pace. Who do I need to contact today? So I can go in, I have 5 learners who are off pace. That just saved me hours of time. Because that data doesn't live anywhere. We can tell you that data, and it's because of the conversations that we have with learners across the globe about what their needs are and how we can solve their problems. So then back to the notifications, you then can create a notification that is based on that data point, even though that's data that's not in the LMS or the SIS, and set up an automatic notification to be sent to any learner who is off pace every Monday saying, hey, you're off pace, pick it up, add another assignment this week. So that is saving time, precious time, because we're doing all of that hard work in the background. And then that can be a text message or an email to the parent, to a success coach, to a supervisor, a manager, or an instructor, or to the learner.
But before we take a next step here, I want to remind everyone that we are live right now. We've had some cool comments come in here from Sydney, from Jennifer, from Tanya over the past things. I would love it if anybody has like a question that that you're burning to ask about data analytics. The place we're going next is, and as Becky and Amy have already put on the table, predictive analytics. Like, I really want to kind of talk about that a little bit more in a little more detail. Throw it in the chat. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, you can do that. We do see it, and we'd love to interact with you. we've been skirting around the topic about, how do this pacing data, as you were saying, Becky, you can actually see what's happening and you can get in front of it, or at least you're in real time with what's happening with the learner, right? There's one big piece that we haven't sort of talked about that I feel like is in the room right now is the corporate space. We talked a lot about K through 12, talked a lot about higher ed. I want to take us there, but before I do that, I don't know, you tell me how would be the easiest way to get there? Should we talk about sort of predictive analytics and then go through corporate, or should we talk about what these sort of lifelong adult learners who are not in a traditional education space? What are I'm interested, what are the data differences that you've seen in IntelliBoard? I'm going to ask the question now. Sorry.
No, you're good.
How do data expectations change? How do they, are they looking at different things? Are we looking at, are the needs different radically? Or I'll just pause there and kind of put that on the table for you. I'm not sure who's the. Go ahead.
We both will, I'm sure. But I wanted to say that the content of those corporate courses, right? Like we think about what we are utilizing learning management systems for corporate governmental agencies, right? Like it is still learning, right? It is still content. It is still, it is high stakes. I think about our clients, and some of it's super high stakes medical training. Some of it's super high stakes aviation training. Some of it's, the content that still needs to be delivered and the content that we need to check that's still absorbed, even for our adult learners. And let's be real honest, more so for our adult learners, right? Who also have lives and also are doing things. And I think all of us three probably know how to get ourselves in and out of a course real quick because we know the tricks, right? Like you have to design for adult learners in a very different way. Although my kid as a kindergarten also figured out how to reset like some of her content to get to 100 to make sure that she saw 100. So, the idea of this instructional design type stuff is no different in our corporate entities. We still have to be able to confirm our corporate learners are spending time where we expect them to spend time. We still need to ensure that our design of our coursework is answering those questions that we know from a compliance and safety standard that we need to have certification on. I think a lot of the conversation changes between did you complete? Did you get a certification? When is that certification up? You have X amount of days to complete this is more corporate leaning, right? I need to quickly get this to the manager of the people who are doing this, right? I need to authorize it. But the nuts and bolts of designing that coursework and monitoring that coursework are still the same. And going back to the notifications of, hey, you adult learner who are busy scampering your work, your house, your athletic programs with your school, with your kids, right? Like, here's the reminder that you are off pace. We would say it a little more kindly for us adults, right? Mm-hmm. And here's the quick link to get back into your content. This is where you left off, right? So still utilizing the tools, still utilizing the checks and balances with the end game and often certification or compliance of. But those inner workings aren't all that different, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're still, and maybe we need additional tools to support our adult educators.
Becky, I want to take this a little bit further, but I want to ask it from, and this is going to be a super product oriented question. Sorry to the audience, but if I'm sitting here and I'm a manager at a company, or I'm even in a school right now, whatever. What we've just talked about sounds pretty cool. All right, let's just even take the pacing data thing. But it also sounds like this is the next year of my life figuring out how to make this work, right? Like how to give me the real honest answer of if I call you today and I say, look, I really liked hearing about this pacing data. Like, I'd really like to implement that in my institute because it sounds like it'd be helpful. Like, am I talking, that will be available in the next 6 months, 10 days, a year from now? Like, what are the factors that go into how I can get myself to be successful? Is it dependent on the size of my institution, my company?
Right. Well, our role at IntelliBoard is to make your life easier. So not only do we have the tools, but we're working on building out the defaults that will meet your needs, K-12, higher ed, corporate, from the jump. So the pacing, that's a new default report for IntelliBoard Next. What'd you say?
Oh, is
It's
that?
there. It's there.
Oh yeah, it's already there. So today, connect today. The notification creator, it's there today. We have some out of the box notifications, but you can also build your own. Yes, if you want to bring in data from a spreadsheet that sits on your desktop, you might need to talk to someone on Amy's team to help you put that together, which that's what they're there for. So that our job is to solve problems and make their lives easier. And we're trying very hard to have that all set up to where it's an out of the box solution. But when you're looking at the predictive learning analytics or bringing data into IntelliBoard, or if you have the super cool dashboard that you really, have in your mind that you want to build, there will be some time to create that or to bring that data in. But we're here to hold your hand and to do it alongside. And we want to do that with you, not only to make it easier for you, but if it's something that you need, most likely another institution needs it as well. Another corporation needs it as well. So we don't want you to build this amazing report all on your own and have it, we want to help with that and then make that a default report or listen to your ideas and build out the solution that meets the needs of the market.
And I think, to me, this also becomes a really important conversation of also giving you the space in the defaults, but then, that pacing, we've put a default date in there, but you can click into that default date and change it, right? And it's point and click. And it changes the code on the back end, right? Like, I don't have to code it and everyone doesn't want me to code it, right? But you can set your parameters. You set the X for the time, the notification of if you have not done this in X amount of time, the notification is built. You set the X, you set the parameters that are of value to your institution, or even within your institution, those can shift. It's not a one size fits all, but we seek to give you the tools and the resources to make those personalizations for your specific audiences.
Right. And so back to the logging, something happens, you talk to a learner, again, corporate, keep thinking corporate. Amy's example of high stakes training. You have this high stakes training course. They completed the course. Now I want to observe this behavior. I want to see this performance. I want to observe this job skill. And the K-12 example of noting a behavior or a conversation now becomes inputting the observation details from the job skill. Same functionality, different application, but then taking that data. So here's another example, like pacing. I observe this on-site job skill and I make notes. Okay, I need to observe it every 30 days, every 45 days, every 60 days. When I input that data into IntelliBoard, not only do I have my note, but then that note becomes a data point, the log date. Now I have an easy formula, log date plus 30 days. I have a new data point that's in my report called next observation, next skill, next whatever. So then I could even create a notification. Like, yes, there may be some front loading, but the end result makes my life easier. It makes me think back to when I was in the classroom and I was asked to be a a pilot teacher for a one-to-one iPad program. This is back in like 2010 or 2011.
It was yesterday.
Last year. It was
2011. 2011. 2011.
Becky was 5.
I was 12. But the like it was probably the hardest that I ever worked on the front loading. But then my class day, the class period, my work day went so much more smoothly, easier. I was able to do more, able to meet the needs of the students differently, differentiate instruction because of all of that work that was done on the front end. It's the same type of thing.
So take me there, because again, you're actually triggering this. I'm kind of this little self-promotion there. I think people should really go check out that conversation with Al Kingsley. It was just published on our podcast a couple weeks ago. But because this is also something he talks about as well, about, you know, how often is it that a school district or, you know, somebody or an institution comes back from the summer and the teachers come for their 1 week of orientation. And they're like, oh, hey, by the way, here's a new system. And you're like, you know, oh my Lord, I have to figure this out. Or I'm Amy, as the vice president of customer success, like I'd love to hear, like, where are the fail points? Like how do you fall on your face with this, and how do you avoid that? I mean, I know starting simple or doing things simple is the easy answer, but like, is there any other concrete examples that you could give us about here's a case of how an institution really screwed this up without naming names, and maybe do it differently or something like that?
Absolutely. And I think that it is when we think about it living in one office, right? Like, well, it's an LMS tool. It lives with the LMS admin. And it's really not an LMS tool. It is a learning tool. And I'm going to flip it just because that's who I am. But like, we all have accreditation, right? We all have these goals. We've set departmental goals. We have SAC, COC. I'm in North Carolina, right? Like that's our accreditation here, but like they're everywhere. We have to report up, right? So I think oftentimes we think about this as a tool that, you know, people are utilizing, but we don't do that middle step of connecting it to where we're already reporting on, right? Like these are the requirements. We know we have to do this anyway. How do we leverage the tools that we have? That the LMS administrator is not the person in institutional effectiveness who's responsible for some of these annual reports, right? The LMS administrator is not the person in financial aid who is trying to validate for federal financial aid funding that the students have actually been in and participated in courses in a census type situation. So with the DOE regulations that are all coming out with substantial education, that's not the LMS administrator's job, right? Like there are so many different people at our institutions and our organizations who rely on data. And so I think one of the big things that we miss doing is brainstorming out who actually needs this beyond this one office. And then just a fun fact, like then you can share funding it too, right? Ooh. Like, whoa, I know, like you have these
there's money involved,
right? Like it doesn't all need to come out of my pot selfishly. Like we need to be thinking more broadly with our data engagement. We need to be thinking more broadly with who needs to be utilizing it. And again, it's the viralness of it. Like you got this thing that did this. It's not on the back of one person to implement it. Everyone has their own little components. And that's where I would still say, start those small little components, super simple, right? Get the buy-in with the financial aid office, get the buy-in with the HR in the corporate. But find the different areas, because we all are hearing, what's the data behind this? Prove it.
Well, okay, so take me there. And I don't know, Becky, if this is in your wheelhouse or not, or whatever, but I'm sure you get questions that you brought this up earlier about data privacy, Big Brother. You know, like how much it not only for the learners, but then also for employees, but then also for even the teachers and the instructors and the professors. They're like, wait, and every move is being tracked. And so what's the conversation you have with clients, or what the conversation you have with people that it's like, ultimately it's framing and your perception of how we do this. So how do you package it so that data is a positive, not necessarily a negative,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the world where we've had some negative outcomes?
Mm-hmm. First of all, as a data company, we clearly take data privacy and very seriously, and have lots of different things in place, because every institution, every corporation does it differently. And you can package the data visibility in many different ways. So not only can we narrow the data by user context or course context as far as what data you see on the learner, but then also within IntelliBoard, what do you see? Not everyone has access to all of the IntelliBoard functions. For example, the notification creator, you can give that to certain roles or to certain people. So your instructors, you say they can see these reports, and then we automatically only show the courses and the reports that the instructor is enrolled in as the instructor. So instructors aren't seeing all of that data for other instructors and students in other courses. So we, if you have, likewise, if you have someone who should be able to see all of the data, but you don't want that person to be an administrator in the LMS, they can go straight to IntelliBoard and see the data there. So we work with the institution, and if it's something, it could be something like there's a specific data field that they don't want instructors to be able to see. We can do that, and we've done it. There's lots of different institutions and different corporations do it differently. So we can narrow the data in lots of different ways, because we want to make it easy, but we want people to have the right data.
Amy, anything you want to tie into that?
I think Becky summed it up. The only thing that I would add is that, this also gives you the space and the tools to be like, you're only having this one little access point, right? Like, I don't need you in my LMS. I don't need you in my SIS. I don't want you to have credentials to those things, because you need guardrails, right? Like, your job is such that I don't need you tinkering with my courses accidentally, right? But I just need you to be able to monitor this one quick thing, right? And so again, that permissioning that Becky spoke to is the name of the game here, and being thoughtful consumers of the data, right? And that's something that all of our organizations and all of our institutions need to be doing.
I never cease to be surprised at how quickly an hour goes by. We've been sitting here talking for 53 minutes. I have two questions for you, though. And before I release you back to your IntelliBoard life, the first one is IntelliBoard Next. Connect this dot for me, because coming up in the eLearn Success Series, not in the May session, but I know in the July session that we have, it's going to be for EdTech nerds. It's going to be all about data science. I know somebody from IntelliBoard will be presenting there as well. There's another gentleman named Josh whose last name is escaping right now, and it's driving me crazy, but he is the head of HR in this, he's the head of this unit in Warner Music, right? And the thing he's going to be talking about is the LMS-less workplace. So they don't even use a learning management system in order to deliver learning in the flow of work, right? Dean Saunders, one of his favorite phrases here at OpenLMS. How does that just suddenly, have I just thrown a huge curveball in the mix here as we look to what the future of learning looks like, as corporations and education institutions continue to evolve, as LMSs continue to evolve, if they just disappear altogether? Moodle 4.0 just came out. Like, what's that future look like? And is IntelliBoard Next like able to just kind of stand on its own?
It's a great question. With IntelliBoard Next, yes, we are all about the learning analytics, and a big piece of that at this time does come from the LMS, but it doesn't have to. It could be from an HRIS system or a CRM or student information system. Combine that with web conferencing tools, combine that with assessment tools and this web service here and this web service over here. And this, entered in data from classroom observation, bringing it all together, tying it to that user context, and then reporting on learning analytics. So it doesn't all have to come from the LMS. And if you don't have an LMS at all, we use a different connection to pull the data together. You could even build your own. You could use IntelliBoard Next with a spreadsheet of data that's not connected to any system at all. So we have.
Don't do that.
But don't do that.
Not recommended. Not recommended. But this goes back to the conversation that we have had several times here at IntelliBoard, right? Like, our educators are passionate about education. They choose the best tools, right? Those tools are not always in the LMS, and they're certainly not always connected. And there's often data living in each of them. So how do we tie that all together in one place? And that's what IntelliBoard Next strives to do. And so if you move with an LMS and then additional tools, that all still combines to inform the learning.
Fantastic. So before my last question is one I ask everybody here on the hot seat before I let you go. And Becky, I'm going to start with you. What are you most excited about for the next, near term, 6 months, 12 months out? What's coming down the pipe? It could be a shiny new object. It could be a different data service. It could be, I don't know, whatever. What are you excited about in this space, or that you'd love to give a shout out to?
With IntelliBoard specifically?
I like the super openness of the question. It could be some nonprofit organization. I don't know. What do you want to
do? As we roll out IntelliBoard Next over the next 6 months, I have to say every day I get joy when, you get that aha or that, it does that. Just because we worked so hard on it for so long, every time I get I love it. It excites me so much. So what I look forward to is how all of these pieces that we've worked on so hard for the last year and a half are all coming together. And it's actually an amazing product. And I love it when what we've worked on, you show it to someone and the reaction is, oh. So I am looking forward to saving teachers' time, saving instructors, managers, supervisor time, and improving those learning outcomes and making that transition from data company to a company that impacts education.
Super cool. Amy, same question to you.
I'll take it a little broader, I think, but we're all sick of talking about the pandemic, right? But it was a major disruptor.
We've managed to go a whole hour without mentioning
a whole hour. I did it. Snuck it in at the end. But it was a huge disruptor, right? Like, and I don't want to live there. But now we have a little bit of space to do the reflection and the learning of what we learned and what we needed, right? And what we need to plan for moving forward. How did this disrupt our education? What did we learn from it? What do we need to change? What did we do well? What do we need to do better? And I feel like that disruption is also aligning with what we need to be doing next. And it's really, truly, no pun intended, but the opportunities that we have with education right now to leverage the disruption to improve should not be lost on any of us. And I hope that we're not so tired from the pandemic that we don't remember to do that and create space for that and really think through where we can improve and where we need to improve to support the next generation of learning. Because again, full circle, all the nerds, it's about that. It's about the education that is fundamentally going to improve our students, ourselves, and the world. And I just am so delighted to be able to be a part of that. And to share that with you, with all of us who feel that passionately about it.
On that note, I want to thank Amy Price, Becky Keith from IntelliBoard for being with me today here on the eLearning Hot Seat. Please come, in just 2 weeks. It's April 21st right now, but on May 4th, we're going to have our instructor session of the eLearning Success Series. All of the tickets are free because of these wonderful sponsors like IntelliBoard that we have. And so please come join us. There's no sales pitch there. It's just it's e-learning professionals and actually education professionals. In that particular session, we were talking about accessibility, diversity and inclusion, micro-credentialing, the future of education, a ton of great speakers. And I invite everybody to come join us. Becky and Amy, thank you so much for your time today. And I will be seeing you very, very soon.
Thank you.
That's great.
See y'all.
Thank you.